All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. It's Friday, so we're going to talk about the best decks for ranked battles. The ranked season wraps up in about 5 days or 4 days. February 25th is when the ranked season ends, which I believe is basically the night of the 24th. So we have a couple of days until ranked is over. It was another short ranked season. And yeah, you know, this is going to be a video about the decks I think you should play to wrap up this ranked season if you are still competing in this ranked season, because it is very interesting meta game this season around. You know, the writing was on the wall. I kind of, well, to be fair, if you go back, I definitely told you guys what was likely going to happen, and that is kind of what's happening. And, you know, I don't think anybody really loves it, but we'll talk about it in today's video. It's going to be a short one. It's going to be a short one today. Not a lot of different decks that I would recommend playing at this point. I think the metagame, 4 weeks or so into the season, things are pretty condensed, and I think everybody understands what's going on in the metagame, but let's break down the deck lists that I would recommend you play. Before we get into it, though, you gotta go register for PMPT number 21, which is tomorrow, Saturday, February 25th at noontime, $150 cash in the prize pool. As you guys heard, Pokemon Pocket is not coming to the official Pokemon competitive circuit, the esports circuit. So if you're looking to compete in Pokemon Pocket, you know, this is the type of stuff you're going to have to, I guess, contend with, or I guess be content with. But it's a whole lot of fun. And we're going to be live streaming it Saturday and Sunday. So definitely go register. Link down in the description below. And we will continue to run our weekly tournament series as, you know, as the weeks go on and into the next season. So this is the last one of this B2 metagame, B2 season. By the time the next tournament comes around next weekend, we will have the next set coming, B2A. But anyway, let's get into the deck. So we have 5 decks today, plus a weekly wild card. So that's why it's probably going to be a bit shorter today. The first deck we're going to take a look at is actually Kangaskhan. So this is kind of the final form of these Kangaskhan decks. So far this season, Kangaskhan kind of came out swinging, saw play in a bunch of different ways. It was seeing play with like Oricorio and Greninja early on in the season. It saw a little bit of play with, of course, Darkrai and a bunch of other baby Pokemon as like a daycare type deck. And at this point, this is sort of what people have settled on with Kangaskhan, and it's a very significant deck in the metagame. You know, it's seeing quite a bit of play, definitely some success here. What I like about this Kangaskhan deck is Kangaskhan, like initially saw a lot of play with Oricorio, but I think that Oricorio kind of is maybe the correct home for Kangaskhan. It's a weird development this season. Realistically, Magnezone Oricorio is by far just the best way to play Oricorio, but the main issue with Magnezone Oricorio is that Hydreigon is everywhere. So that is a matchup that is quite poor, right, for Magnezone Oricorio. So I think some people are just sort of finding a new home for an Oricorio-based deck. Of course, this deck isn't entirely based around Oricorio, but it is an Oricorio deck, and I actually really like it. It does a whole lot of different things. Kind of Turbo Kangaskhan, Turbo Oricorio style going on with Pichu, but also, you know, Turbo Darkrai. So now we have 3 Pokemon on the bench that we could set up quickly to attack with Pichu if we lead off with it. We have Ilima for if you lead Kangaskhan, which is not super ideal. If you lead Darkrai, that's also not that ideal, quite frankly, but it's Poison Barb, Nihilego. So this is a very interesting deck. So many different kind of moving pieces here. I think it's definitely one of the most unique things currently in the metagame. And I would say really the only sort of new strategy that has ended up being a significant factor in the metagame this late in the season, which is interesting. I definitely had my eyes on Mimikyu, and it was definitely the best performing new card and new strategy as time went on. I just don't know why people choose maybe not to play Mimikyu. I don't know. Maybe just because it's like a Greninja deck and they'd rather play like Altaria Greninja. There might just be other decks too similar to that Mimikyu deck, but I do think Mimikyu is really, really good. But again, people want to play Kangaskhan, so that's what they're playing. And again, this is a strong deck. So it's Turbo Dark Kangaskhan with an Oricorio in here and Nihilego Poison Barb package. We have 1 red, 1 Giovanni, both double boosted by Kangaskhan's attack. We have a Cyrus because why not? Serena and Ilima, both really good cards to play when you're playing just a one of mega Pokemon like Kangaskhan. That is pretty crucial to your deck list. Yes, we are playing Lucky Ice Pop. You're going to notice that a lot throughout this video. And it is obviously the #1 like point of contention when it comes to the current metagame is Lucky Ice Pop. Just the inherent nature of this card is really like not fun. It's just sometimes you can just stop yourself from losing the game by getting lucky, and sometimes you can't, but it's almost just always worth it to play Lucky Ice Pop in your deck because sometimes it'll just win you the game by getting lucky and healing a bunch of HP in one turn. You know, it's just a very strange card like that, especially in a metagame where there's a lot of really high HP Pokemon. Like a lot of these mega Pokemon, you know, you're gonna have to 2-hit KO them anyway, right? So things like Kangaskhan, like Altaria, or literally any mega Pokemon that you might be playing that has a lot of HP, Mega Absol's an example of this. If you were going to pretty consistently just 2-hit KO it, Ice Pop is actually pretty easily able to extend them outside of the 2-hit KO range, which makes them a lot more volatile. You know what I mean? It makes the matchups feel a lot less easy to contend with. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, and I'm sure other players have seen it, where, all you have to do is hit this Absol for a little bit of damage and then you win or whatever, and then they just Ice Pop for 100 damage and heal for 100 damage, and then and then you just lose, right? Because you just can't you can't take the KO. So that's what Lucky Ice Pop does, and it's honestly just going to be a card that you probably see play in every deck. Maybe in tournaments we end up banning it, but in ranked battles, you gotta play Lucky Ice Pop. I mean, it's just, if you're not playing Ice Pop in ranked, you're kind of just trolling yourself. Now, be careful though, because playing Lucky Ice Pop have actually gone beyond my timer because I flipped so many heads in a row that I just didn't have time to do anything else. So be careful of Lucky Ice Pop because it can do that. Anyway, Mega Kang is gone. I'm glad we're talking about it. I do think that it's a totally fine deck, but it's probably not something I would recommend above any of the other stuff that you would consider top of meta, but it is, I think, worth mentioning. So there you go. Next up is Altaria. We are going to talk about Altaria in a couple of different decks in today's video. Again, Lucky Ice Pop thrown in here. This is going to be sort of the traditional, what I'm calling the toolbox Altaria deck, right? And I think people play Altaria in a lot of different ways. You could play it with Indeedee Giratina, which honestly sounds kind of fun to me. I don't know if many people have tested that this season. You can play it with Greninja, which is going to be talked about in today's video because that deck, I think, still is probably the best deck to play for ranked, and it's been, I think, for a very long time. That deck is ridiculous, but this Altaria deck is more ethical and pretty fun to play in the sense that you have so many different cards that all do different things, and it's all built around Mega Altaria. This is the only mega deck, Mega Pokemon meta deck that is sort of built how we expected Mega Pokemon to be played, which is that you just play Mega Pokemon and then you play a bunch of other cards in Pokemon that kind of support the Mega, and that's how you play the game, and that's how you win, right? That's how we kind of assumed Mega Pokemon would be, but there's really not many strong Mega Pokemon that are consistent enough to be like that. Altaria is kind of the guy. But anyway, we have Chinglings and we also have red cards. So Chingling red card is always really nice. Copycat pairs really well with Chingling. And I honestly, guys, I mean, I've said it for so long, but Chingling really is probably the best counter meta card in the game. It's just, a lot of these Greninja decks and Hydreigon decks and whatnot, they really don't play that middle evolution very often. And for some reason, people always thought that, one copy of a middle evolution in your deck counters Chingling, but it really doesn't. As long as you're stopping the turn 2 rare candy, Chingling's doing its job very effectively. Now, I do think one of the more difficult things about the current metagame and Chingling is all of the Poison Barb Nihilego stuff, which of course isn't great. It's a pretty decent way to counter Chingling, right? Is by, Poison Barbing and your Dino in the active and then putting that Nihilego on the bench. So that stuff can be pretty annoying. But this deck does have counterplay to that. We have Klefki to discard those tool cards from our opponent's active Pokemon, and it is searchable with Lycia. So I really like this deck, and I think that it's a really smart decision. We're not only also playing Klefki, but we're also playing Comfey. So we have double Poison Barb counters here to really protect Chingling, and then of course we have Jirachi to deal some bench damage, and that's kind of all you need here, realistically. I really like this deck, and I think Altaria really is sort of the #1 example of a successful, thing that they've added to the metagame that doesn't feel... It's obviously really good, but it doesn't feel like RNG and super annoying to have to play. You know what I mean? I think Altaria is probably just the best example of something they've added to the game in quite some time. Suicune and Greninja is annoying. I get that because it's so popular in Greninja in general, but Hydreigon in Absol is a big stain, I would say, on the current metagame. Nobody thinks that's a good thing for the competitive health of the game, but I think Altaria is kind of a home run, and it has been. So I'm curious to see if we get a replacement, not even a replacement, but just something that is on the same par as Mega Altaria, because this really is the #1 example. And Training Arena, don't sleep on Training Arena. It's going to boost your damage by 10. That is actually quite relevant. 140 is way better than 130. So again, I really like this deck. And again, a Lucky Ice Pop. I know people are like, oh, look, you got to play it. You're in ranked battles right now. If you're not playing at least one Lucky Ice Pop in your deck, you're just missing out on a handful of games that you're going to win just because you're playing Lucky Ice Pop. But I know that doesn't sound fun, but the whole concept of ranked is to win games and to get on win streaks and have a good win percentage. Lucky Ice Pop is kind of just worth playing in most decks. So here you go. I actually really like this deck. This would be my choice. I've been playing a little bit of ranked. I really haven't decided to grind it too much this season, but if I were to grind ranked, it would probably be this Altaria. Next up might surprise some people, and that's Charizard. You know, I really think people are sleeping on Charizard. This is by far its best performing season overall, and it's floating around a 50% win rate. And what's really funny about Charizard this season is that it's operating exactly like I expected it to operate. The thing with Charizard is that it's really bad into certain things, but it's absolutely insane into other things. So the whole concept with Charizard is that you can 1-hit KO anything in the game. That's obviously really powerful if you're playing up against a bunch of 3-prize Pokemon, and that's what we see with the matchup spreads for Mega Charizard. Why is that into things like Altaria, into Kangaskhan, you know, into like Steelix or whatever other Mega Pokemon matchup you might be going up against, it does really well, and it's actually a really respectable deck. Its matchups into things like, you know, Oricorio Magnezone and Hydreigon are definitely a bit lower. We're getting down into like the 40% win rate range or lower. So I know it sounds weird to recommend Charizard when Hydreigon's definitely kind of all over the place, but it's not something that I think you should sleep on. I really think Charizard is a totally fine deck to play right now. And when I was making this video and I wanted to recommend some decks that you should be playing for ranked, I actually think Charizard's pretty strong. And I think at this point, there's probably a decent counter meta development where there's probably just a lot of like Altarias in decks that people are playing to beat Hydreigon, and Charizard kind of beats all of those decks. So Charizard is kind of sitting in a strangely counter meta placement in the meta game. But again, as time goes on, this is going to end up being really, really strong. I can envision, you know, 2, 3, 4 months from now, people are just going to be complaining about Charizard because it's just gatekeeping all of these other strategies because it just 1-hit KOs things and then the game's over, right? So it is sort of a very unique aspect of Charizard, and to be fair, it's really not that hard to set this Pokemon up. I mean, Charizard is extremely strong, very matchup dependent, but definitely a good deck currently in the metagame. Next up, we have Altaria and Greninja. I don't know how many times we've talked about this deck in videos, but likely a lot. But I guess for anybody who's new and doesn't know what this deck's all about, it's an inconsistent deck. There's a lot of moving pieces here. You want to build up Altaria. You also want to lead Chingling, and you want to draw into Froakie, Greninjas, and rare candies. That's like the whole concept with the deck, and it's a little bit awkward to kind of get that all going. But when you really add up the fact that Chingling is one of the best Pokemon in the game, and Swablu can put your opponent to sleep whenever you want it to, it's actually just one of the most powerful decks in the entire game. If this deck gets set up early, if it draws all the cards it needs to, it's over. You're not going to win. You're just not going to be able to. Greninja snipes with Mega Altaria full damage and Cyrus thrown in there. Like, you just really don't stand a chance against this deck list. And when it comes to ranked battles, I really think that this is one of the few decks in the game that just does not care what it's going up against, right? So that's how we kind of categorize high roll decks, is that they don't really function in the metagame. They function kind of separately from the actual like whole mechanism of how all these decks interact. This deck has some better matchups, some worse matchups, but at the end of the day, like if it draws the cards, it's probably just going to win, and it's very similar to Hydreigon in that sense. I will say that this is a much less simple deck to play and play properly than Hydreigon, which is kind of a weird thing going on right now. I know a lot of people are playing Hydreigon, definitely the most popular deck in the game. This is a deck that doesn't play Lucky Ice Pop, but it plays Greninja, and you'll probably get to notice that, right? Every deck in the video today is playing like Greninja or Hydreigon or Ice Pops or a combination of all of them. Those are just like RNG cards that have the opportunity to win you the game, you know? So like if you're playing thousands of ranked games or hundreds of ranked games, like those are cards that just you're probably going to want to play in general. So I don't really have a lot to say about this deck other than that I find this deck absolutely hilarious, but super frustrating to play and play against because so many times it's just out of your hands. It really is. You know, they're like, oh, they got Greninja Rare Candy turn 2. Oh, they put me asleep with Swablu. Like, okay. You know, like I'll just go to the next one, I guess. And that's kind of what we're doing here. Sing Swablu is one of the more interesting choices that we've ever seen in the game. I don't know if the developers really thought that this card would be that good, but for it to be like a searchable kind of throwaway basic Pokemon that evolves into a very strong Mega Pokemon, this card is absurd. This is one of the most ridiculous things they've ever added to the game, and I think it's a really good illustration that previous evolutions of cards actually do matter quite a bit when determining the viability of the final evolution Pokemon, right? We've seen this before. Like this is this is a reality, right? I think a big reason why Altaria is so good is because Swablu is so good. And anyway, that's how I feel about this deck. So let me know what you guys think. Do people play this? In tournaments, a ton of people play this, and it just dominates because it's just so ridiculous. In ranked, I don't know if that many people are playing this deck. So comment down below, let me know. I don't see it a ton in ranked, but I haven't played a ton of ranked this season, so it's kind of a weird thing. Like, my experience for ranked this season has been pretty diverse. Like, I haven't grinded really high up in the rankings this season, but I've seen a bunch of different decks. So I don't know. Let me know. Let me know what kind of decks you guys have seen in ranked. But anyway, next up is going to be Suicune and Greninja. I forgot. Did we not put Hydreigon in this? I don't think we added Hydreigon. All right, so I guess we don't have Hydreigon on the video today, but maybe we did that on purpose. Maybe I just didn't include Hydreigon because I don't recommend that you play it. I'm just kidding. If you want to play Hydreigon, go play Hydreigon. But I guess it's not in the video today, which is pretty funny. People are gonna comment, they're gonna be like, what about Hydreigon? And they just didn't watch the video. So if you made it to this, if you're watching this part of the video, can you comment that for me? Can someone just timestamp this and be like, yo, Maddie forgot, but you can definitely play Hydreigon. I'm not gonna do it, you guys can do it for me. Anyway, that's pretty funny. Subconsciously, I just didn't even want to talk about it in today's video. But this is Suicune and Greninja. This is actually a slightly updated version. People are playing one starting plains, one giant cape, which I actually really do like. And you might be like, well, what's really the difference between playing one giant cape or two giant capes or splitting, having one of each? There is actually a pretty significant difference here. And I think it's actually an interesting development of Suicune and Greninja is this particular interaction, right? So if you giant cape a Suicune, of course, it goes to 160 HP. But if you starting plains and have a giant cape on Suicune, that's 180. Now, 180 HP on a Suicune EX with Indeedee on the bench and access to Irida is a whole different story. It really is. And I think that this is a development that's actually helping Suicune and Greninja pretty dramatically into the, Hydreigon, Poison Barb Nihilego stuff, right? Because the math really does actually add up pretty well. You can kind of just tank hits like crazy. Yeah, I mean, 180 HP healing for 60 in one turn when you combine Irida and Indeedee. Like, sometimes they just can't hit two-hit KO you. Like, that goes above like the 200 damage kind of threshold that Hydreigon going into a Mega Absol would be able to KO you. So if you're able to live an additional turn with your Suicune in the active in the face of a Hydreigon deck, that's a very, very big difference. And then I think that that's why this development is actually quite interesting. So I know it's just a one-card change, but this is something that I would actually really recommend for Suicune players, and I think it is actually a very interesting development. Not that many decks are playing Stadium cards, but it also gives you a slight advantage. Also to counter Altaria, because playing a Stadium counters an Altaria. And as we saw, some of those Altaria decks are playing Training Arena to hit for that 140 numbers, right? So this allows you to kind of get rid of their Stadium by playing our own Stadium, and you can see kind of how that works, right? So very interesting. It's an interesting development. I know I've talked for like 5 minutes about one card change in this deck, but it really does change certain things. And that's why I love Pokemon Pocket, because small cards like this can actually change decks pretty dramatically and how they function into other matchups. And that's what this channel's about. That's why we talk about this stuff. I don't know. Some people might not be interested, but I certainly am with small things like that. Moving forward, I think honestly, like, I know some people were disappointed. We covered all of the new cards that were revealed in the trailer yesterday, so go watch that video. I know a lot of people were kind of initially disappointed by some of those cards, but honestly, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, like a real limb. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the metagame development after this new set release is actually going to be pretty significant. That's my hot take. I know some people are disappointed with Paldea and the reused artwork and whatnot. I actually think that the metagame is going to change pretty dramatically. And that's just my guess. So I could be wrong about that, but maybe that's just me being hopeful. But I honestly, I'm feeling it. I genuinely am feeling it. It's going to happen. What was, so this is going to be B2A. What was A2A? Was that Extra Dimensional Crisis? Was it actually? No, that was A3A. What was A2A? What was that mini set? I completely forget. Was it Triumphant Light? It might have been Triumphant Light, which, as we know, was pretty interesting. So anyway, that's just I'm just guessing there, but we'll have to wait and see. The weekly wild card this week. Let's get to it here before we wrap up this video. Again, it is going to be a short one. The weekly wild card this week, and normally I reserve wild cards not for decks that are bad or new or anything. These are decks that are kind of on the fringe of things that honestly should be looked at probably as more viable than more people are playing them. So the wild card this week is actually Blaziken. Yeah. And guess what? Honestly, I think it kind of chalks down to Lucky Ice Pop. What we've seen so many times with Blaziken is that it's actually really good. It's such a weird card. I don't know why. I think most people kind of stopped playing Blaziken and just started to play Hydreigon, and that became kind of the typical, and that kind of became the standard for most things. But you got to understand, like, there's really not a whole lot of Chingling going around, and Hydreigon decks don't play Chingling. So Mega Absol can kind of come in, you know, tank a hit from Lucky Ice Pop, tank a hit from Hydreigon, KO Hydreigon, right, with Mega Burning, and then you just Lucky Ice Pop, and maybe you can get above the threshold. It's actually a very, very dangerous deck. I think that at this point in the season, and I know we only have a couple days left, but I think that Blaziken is very underrated. It's just something people forgot about for some reason. And if I had to push any, you know, propaganda in today's video, is that, you know, honestly, Blaziken is way better than people give it credit for. It is effectively the exact same thing as Hydreigon, except that it's worth 3 prizes instead of 1, but it doesn't damage itself, and it's got a bunch more HP. So, like, if you really think about it like that, and you could play Lily and Ice Pop in this deck, you could do a lot of different stuff, quite frankly. But this is not a bad deck whatsoever. This is probably one of the most disrespected decks in the entire game right now. Along with Charizard, I think Fire is actually kind of up and coming. Like, I'm not even kidding you. I think these Fire Pokemon are really strong, and they probably deserve to see a little bit more play. As I mentioned before, I did not include Hydreigon in this video, and that's blatantly because I forgot. But is anybody really disappointed that I didn't showcase Hydreigon? The deck lists haven't changed. They're the exact same deck with all of the stuff that normally sees play, the Poison Barb, Nihilego, sometimes Leap Over Absol with Ice Pops and stuff. Like, it's the same deck. So you're not missing out by me not highlighting it, but it's pretty funny. I did forget to include it in the video, but I don't regret it because I'm tired of talking about Hydreigon. I don't think it's really worth making like a separate video and talking about Ice Pop and Hydreigon because I mention it all the time in these videos. But if anybody is interested, I probably will maybe wait. Like we'll have to wait and see when the next set comes out and the new cards come in and they kind of change the metagame. If Ice Pop and Hyrule is still like super prominent, then I'll maybe cover it and make a specific video about it. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think that Pokemon Pocket right now, from a competitive metagame perspective, is just a little bit it's a little bit lacking. You know what I mean? I've never been a big fan of like the RNG Hyrule strategies. Like, I'm just not. Like, I think that in a world where it's all Giratina Darkrai and it's Suicune Greninjas, like, I know a lot of people didn't love those decks and how dominant they were, but they weren't purely RNG based decks. They were very consistent tempo based decks. And now we have something that's pure RNG, pure Hyrule, and it's really good. And as you can see, that's sort of kind of what's dominating. But the progression in tournament metagames, and maybe this weekend will be different, we'll have to wait and see. But if you go back, you will notice that Hydreigon really hasn't had a great win rate. So the metagame is sort of developing around Hydreigon. And honestly, over the last couple of tournaments, it hasn't had that good of a win rate. In fact, it might have had a negative win rate, which is a positive development, quite frankly. Yeah, you know, again, I made a video about it a couple of weeks ago, but they released an entire expansion of cards that are all weak to Hydreigon pretty much. So, you know, I don't know why they did that, but it is what it is. Yeah, that's the video today. It's a short one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to go play, by the way, this weekend and register. Link down in the description below for PMPT number 21. $150 cash in the prize pool. It's going to be a ton of fun. Definitely go play. Like and subscribe. We'll see you guys later. Peace out. Have a good one. And yeah. Bye.